Climatic changes and communal conflicts in South Sudan. Founded in 2011, the young nation of South Sudan is currently facing a multitude of intertwined security and development challenges. 50 years of civil war have left the region comprising today's South Sudan with a weak economy and little capacities to embark on its nation-building process. Moreover, as a consequence of climate change, South Sudan is threatened by increasingly frequent droughts, which disrupt rural livelihoods and exacerbate local conflicts between communal groups. Historically, violent conflicts between pastoralist communities have been a recurring phenomenon in the region that comprises today's South Sudan. Living under harsh environmental conditions and being frequently exposed to droughts, the region's people have often fought over livestock and the access to water and grazing land. With the progressive deterioration of climatic conditions and the increasing implication of local communities into the South Sudanese civil war, these conflicts have, however, become more violent. According to the UCDP conflict database, communal conflicts in South Sudan have killed more than 7,000 people between 1993 and 2013 and displaced many more. They have also impeded trade and agriculture, thus causing famines and crippling the local economy. The origins of this situation are complex and manifold, yet practitioners and experts have become increasingly attentive to the role of climate change and more erratic weather conditions as an aggravating factor in the South Sudanese context. In the following, we briefly sketch the possible linkages between climatic changes and communal violence in South Sudan. Pastoral communities in South Sudan are increasingly exposed to adverse environmental conditions. Rainfalls have decreased by 10 to 20%, and temperatures have increased by more than 1 degree centigrade since the middle of the 1970s. This also corresponds to a period of high increase of CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere. These changes are accompanied by an increased frequency of extreme weather events, such as droughts and floods, with more than 55% of the South Sudanese population being directly affected. As a result, essential water and grazing resources have become increasingly scarce, and their availability subjected to important fluctuations. More frequent droughts have also affected migratory movements of pastoralists. Herders in the region are used to a certain degree of environmental variability and plan their movements accordingly. Yet, repeated droughts force them to range more widely and encroach more frequently on land claimed by other communities. This can create serious tensions and even incite violence as newcomers and original inhabitants compete for water and grazing land in the receiving areas. In South Sudan, these dynamics add to an already fragile situation in which conflicts over survival resources are likely to escalate. The South Sudanese political and institutional context is a particularly weak one. The country has just recently embarked on its nation-building process, and governance structures remain poorly developed. This situation is aggravated by the inability of the government to prevent the proliferation of weapons and armed militias across its territory. In addition, local resource conflicts are frequently exploited and exacerbated as a way to foster support for different political leaders. Dinka and Nuer communities, for example, have become heavily involved in an ongoing struggle between President Salva Kiir and former Vice President Riek Machar. Against the backdrop of ever more frequent droughts, these factors encourage and facilitate the use of violence as a means for local communities to gain access to scarce resources. Strategies for mitigating communal conflicts in South Sudan are applied in different domains, ranging from institutional solutions and capacity building to foreign policy tools. As a way to improve the state's ability to respond to local conflicts, a major strategy consists in arming and training security forces and extending the government reach into remote pastoralist areas. To a lesser extent, this strategy also involves the improvement of local administration, infrastructures, and public services in order to reduce rural communities' vulnerability to drought. In contrast, institutional solutions which empower local communities to effectively address conflicts and manage shared resources are only weakly attempted. The UN has sent over 12,000 personnel to South Sudan with a broad mandate that includes the prevention of intercommunal violence and the protection of civilians. Overall, there have been partial successes in mitigating the communal conflicts. The level of violence has generally decreased, and some grievances have been addressed. Yet, lack of financial resources and limited institutional capacities restrain the effectiveness of peace-building measures. Displacements persist, and communal resource conflicts are exacerbated by latent rivalries between South Sudan's political elites. As explained in this analysis, progressive warming and more frequent droughts further add fuel to this situation. Hence, a solution which reflects both local competition for resources and national struggles for political power needs to yet be found so that a lasting peace between South Sudan's multiple communities can be made possible. For a more detailed analysis of this and other cases, please visit factbook.ecc-platform.org.